Dileep Singh, 54-year-old male, retired army personnel, resident of Alwar, admitted in our hospital on day 5 of illness. History of present illness. Patient was symptomatically well 5 days back. After having dinner, he went to washroom by himself. As he came back, his wife noticed change in his voice, but she was able to understand what he was saying. At that time, patient was able to comprehend, but his speech was slurred.
Okay. So let us stop at this.
Yes.
So after having dinner, that means it must be late evening. So
Yes,
he's
sir.
supposed to be okay entire day, right?
Yeah, right.
So you're supposed to be okay entire day. And when he was returning from washroom, his wife noticed change in voice, but she was able to understand what he was saying, and you said his speech was slurred. So change in his voice,
Yes,
is
sir.
it a vocal cord problem, dysphonia, or dysarthria, or dysphasia?
Sir,
From this at this point of time,
sir, it was dysarthria.
why did you say dysarthria from the
Uh,
story?
sir, as his wife said, he was able to understand what he was saying, and his quality of words. She was able to understand what he was saying. So there was no aphasia, but the quality of voice, the articulation was not proper.
Okay. Now, this patient has come to you at this time. Patient was coming back from the washroom. The wife felt there's something wrong with his speech. She brings him to your casualty. Now, what is your thought process?
So,
How will you manage? How will you proceed? Because these
so
are all
if
very important. See, once the patient has a full neurological deficit, that case will be given to you for examination, because the examiner would like to know how you examine, what are your findings and all that. But in clinical practice, you should be able to know how to deal with a situation on day 1 of the illness. Patient has come to you on day 5. On day 1, in the night at 8:30 or 9, he is brought to the casualty. What do you think is happening, and what will you do for this patient?
uh, on the basis of history, if this patient is having if the patient is complaining of dysarthria and which is of sudden onset, so I will think of a vascular cause. So to rule out, so to confirm my diagnosis, I will go for a first. I will take the proper history, and after the examination, I will go for a neuroimaging.
Okay, what will you examine in this patient?
So patient came with the complaint of dysarthria.
Correct.
So I will I have to rule out the things. First, I have to rule out the vocal cord palsy. Then I have to see if there is weakness of other laryngeal muscle or pharyngeal muscles. Then except this, whether there is any facial weakness, I will see, because of facial weakness also patient can have dysarthria, and I will examine the tongue. So
Okay, so
after
because it is abrupt onset, so naturally you think of a vascular cause. That means a stroke, right? So
right.
when the patient comes to the casualty, you do a focused neurological examination. That means, where is the dysarthria due to? Is it a hemiparesis dysarthria, or it is a brainstem dysarthria? But dysarthria can occur in stroke due to carotid artery as well as stroke due to brainstem. So your examination should focus on whether he has a brainstem symptoms and signs, like what?
So in brainstem, patient will have involvement of third to 12th cranial nerve. So it will depend. If midbrain is involved, so third or fourth cranial nerve will be third or fourth cranial nerve involvement. I will see whether patient has ptosis, or if there is pons involvement. So I will go with whether
Whether
patient
the
has
patient
any
has
facial
not
weakness,
facial
and
weakness, lower motor neuron. You see,
no.
imagine the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and medulla. So what are all the cranial nerves? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right up to 12.
Right.
So if you
12.
find any lower motor neuron cranial nerve dysfunction, like palatal palsy, patient has dysphagia, diplopia, ptosis. So once these are there, then you are sure that it is a brainstem localization. Okay. So what will you do there? Look for diplopia, look for lower motor neuron facial, give him a little water, ask him to drink, whether there is any nasal regurgitation, whether there is a choking sensation. So that will take care of a brainstem localization. Then for carotid artery, hemiparesis. So look for evidence, ask him to keep the hand like this and see whether there is any pronator drift. So mild degree of paresis can be because of pronator drift, and ask him to walk on heels and on toes and see whether the patient has weakness of the lower limb in walking. So this is what one should do. When you get a patient at this stage, you of course think of a stroke, and to confirm that you look for focused neurological signs of hemiparesis or brainstem involvement. Okay, you have done that. He doesn't have anything else except dysarthria. Now what will you do?
So now I will go for a neurological imaging.
You go for a imaging.
Yes, sir.
You don't want to do other, see there are what is called as a stroke mimics. Hyperglycemia,
Right,
hypoglycemia,
sir. Hypoglycemia,
hyponatremia.
migraine, hemiplegic migraine, or
So
any
you must do a,
space occupying lesion.
no, you should do a blood sugar, you should do a serum electrolytes, and then also, of course, everybody will do blood sugar as soon as the patient comes to casualty. Then you want to do a neuroimaging. What neuroimaging you want to do now at this stage?
So because the onset of symptom is less than 4.5 hours, so I will go for MR scan if this is available at my center.
You will go for an MR scan.
If the onset of symptom is less than 4.5 hours.
We are talking about this patient, okay? The patient has come to you within 2 hours.
So I will go for MR scan.
So you will refer him to a diagnostic center for an MR scan to confirm?
So if my hospital has the facility of MR scan, then only I will say I'll go for MR scan. If MR scan facility is not present in my hospital, and if we have a CT machine, so I will go for a CT scan.
Which is better, CT or MR?
Sir, it depends, because the patient came in window period. So if I have the time to thrombolize him, if it came to be a case of ischemic stroke, so I will go for MR scan. But if patient came after 4.5 hours, so I can go with a CT scan.
Okay. So what you are saying is the patient has come for dysarthria, whether the patient is a fit candidate for thrombolysis if it is a ischemic stroke. So what you have to do is neither you send him for MR scan nor you send him for a CT scan. You refer him to a hospital which has thrombolysis facility available round the clock. You understand? You don't write an MR scan and send him to a hospital. You refer to casualty and tell them to alert the stroke unit or the neurologist who gives thrombolysis. Let him decide what are all the types of MR scan he wants. Okay.
Okay.
So in this patient, would you, for example, this patient is very likely that the MR scan will be normal. Then what do you do? Because he has only minimal neurological problem of dysarthria. MR scan is normal. Do you give thrombolysis? Is he clinically, is he a candidate for thrombolysis? We'll do an MR scan later. Clinically, is he a candidate for thrombolysis?
No, because patient just has one symptom. He just has dysarthria.
Yeah, you're right.
We'll not
we
go for
will not do thrombolysis for this particular symptom only. Okay. We will not do thrombolysis only because he has got a minimal neurological deficit, but we will definitely admit him and get an MR scan done and admit him for what? To observe
For
whether he develops a hemiparesis later. Then as soon as he develops hemiparesis, then we'll immediately go for thrombolysis treatment. So even though the patient may say that I am all right, doctor, only slurring of speech, I want to go home, you will have to tell them at this point of time, you are having a minimum problem, but this is the beginning of a major problem like a total paralysis. So if you are in the hospital, we can give thrombolysis because immediately we can take you, even though the window period may be 4.5 hours, the earlier you do, the better is the recovery. Suppose you do within 1 hour, is different from you do at the end of 4 hours. The recovery rate is totally different because between 1 hour and 4 hours, a lot more brain neurons are damaged. So the recovery will be much less. So we'll have to inform all these things and admit the patient. Now, is this a TIA?
So in TIA, there is
Is this a TIA?
So here the patient is having progress. This arthria is continuous. It is not improving. So till now, I cannot say it is TIA.
So what is the definition of TIA?
So it is a focal neurological deficit that usually remains for less than 24 hours and usually subsides in 1 hour with minimal or no neurological deficit.
Yeah, even though earlier transient ischemic attack was defined as 24 hours, now we know most of the TIAs last for several minutes to maybe half an hour or 1 hour maximum. So by the time the patient reaches hospital, if he is already showing improvement, in his speech, that means it is more likely to be TIA. Or by the time he reaches casualty after 1 hour or 2 hours, he is almost normal, then we know that it is a TIA. But yet we have to tell him to get admitted because he may get a stroke within the next few hours. So suppose this patient you have seen and he is already recovering, MR scan is normal. Please remember, MR scan may not show a structural lesion even with a dense hemiplegia when you do it within a matter of couple of hours. but that is a time when we need to do thrombolysis. So MR scan normal, patient has a dense hemiplegia, he requires thrombolysis. So what do you do further? MR scan is normal in this patient. His dysarthria is slightly improving. What treatment will you advise?
So first I will go for the basic investigations. There is a score ABCD2. So according to that, I will check out the risk of
treatment. No, MR scan is normal. Patient is slightly improving. Somebody else has also written Kaushik NHS less than 5. So it does not need thrombolysis at this moment. Absolutely right. But what treatment will you give him immediately?
So immediately I will give aspirin or along with aspirin along with statin. I will give dual antiplatelet plus statin. Correct. At present.
So what we do is you send him for a scan in the hospital, immediately find out what the scan report is. If it is normal, by default, it is a ischemia. If it shows bleeding, then we know it is hemorrhage. If it is showing ischemia, by default it is ischemia. Immediately you start clopidogrel 75, aspirin 150 and a statin 40 milligrams to prevent a possible complete stroke. But suppose this patient with this story has come after a day, after 24 hours, when he is out of window period, what imaging you will do?
So then I will go for CT scan.
Why?
Because now I don't need to thrombolyze this patient because he came after the window period. So there is no use of MR scan. I will directly go with CT scan to just see whether it is hemorrhagic. So if no hemorrhage is shown, so I will simply consider it as a ischemic stroke and
Very
we'll
good.
start antiplatelet.
Very good. When he comes out of the window period, all we want to know is should we give antiplatelet or not? That means we want to know whether there is a hemorrhage or not. So CT scan is normal. By default, it is ischemic infarct, and then we put him on antiplatelets. If CT scan shows hemorrhage, then we stop antiplatelet if he is on. Okay, fine. So these are very important because these are the practical problems. When you face it in your clinical practice, this is what you are supposed to do when it comes with only this problem of slurring of speech. Right, good. Next.
So she also observed slight deviation of angle of mouth towards the left side. At that time, there was no weakness observed by the patient or his wife.
So what is this? What does this mean? Wait.
Uh,
Don't. What does this mean?
so patient is there is deviation of angle of mouth towards the left side. So now I think that facial nerve involvement has come, but practically he has no weakness. So no hemiparesis.
Which side facial paralysis?
Uh, so because the face is deviated towards the left side, so that means the weakness is on the right side.
Okay. So what is the clue now? If the patient has a right side facial weakness, what is the clue? Is it a brain stem or is it a carotid territory or vertebro-basilar territory?
So it should come in brain stem.
Brain stem. But you don't know
Brain
whether
stem.
it is a LMN or UMN, isn't it?
UMN.
If the patient has difficulty to close the eyes as well as difficulty in angle of the mouth, then we know it is a lower motor neuron facial. And very rightly, as you said, it is a brainstem involvement. But if it is only upper motor neuron facial, it can be carotid territory also. So only the examination will tell us further. Okay, next.
So in the morning at around 4:30 a.m., he felt difficulty in moving his right side.
That evening they didn't go to any doctor.
No, sir, they didn't go to any doctor.
See, that is the problem. That is why we keep on shouting neurologist, stroke specialist, brain attack. People go immediately, heart attack immediately. But when there is a neurological problem like motor weakness, slurring, gait improvement, they'll say, oh, let us go tomorrow. What is the hurry? So that is why we are trying to educate the public saying that it is a brain attack, FAST, F-A-S-T. So face, arm, speech, if any of them are affected, immediately rush to the nearest hospital, which has a facility for stroke treatment. That is at least thrombolysis, if not intra-arterial and intervention. So this is a classical, they don't bother about it till they develop more neurological deficit. So what happened next day?
So in the morning at around 4:30 a.m., he felt difficulty in moving his right side of the body as he tried getting up from the bed and had to take help from his wife. Subsequently, at 6 a.m., as he was going to the washroom, his wife noticed that she was not able to hold him and had to call to take help from their son. On questioning, wife is not sure whether weakness was more in lower limb or upper limb.
So what is happening now?
Sir, now patient has developing hemiparesis.
Right hemiparesis, right?
Right.
If only the patient was admitted the previous night, as soon as the right hemiparesis was discovered, he would have been shifted for thrombolysis if he is an eligible candidate. That is the reason why a patient who has a TIA or a minor neurological deficit should be educated to get admitted. You understand now? All of you. This case very clearly illustrates what is the necessity to admit if the patient has only mild dysarthria. This is the necessity. If the patient is in the hospital, already an MR scan was done, we know what is happening, and as soon as there is a neurological deficit of hemiparesis, he would have been there taken for immediate thrombolysis if the MR scan shows an infarct or normal. So that is the reason how you should deal with a patient who comes with a minimal neurological deficit. Otherwise, oftentimes the patient, the relative, and the doctor, they think, "Arey, ye kya hai? Just okay, you can go home, take aspirin, and go home." and they won't even educate them that you have to come back in the middle of the night if there is any problem. So please understand this, very important. Next.
So at this time, his wife noticed further deterioration of his speech, as now she was not able to understand what he was trying to say. Comprehension was intact. She also noticed drooling of saliva from his mouth. They took him to a local homeopathic doctor who gave some treatment. Details were unknown to family.
Okay.
So,
So day two also they did not come. Anyway, that was late. Then next.
so
What
on
is
day
this?
three of
1 minute. What is the drooling of saliva means what? What has happened?
so it is because of facial muscle weakness.
Why is saliva drooling out? What
So
is the mechanism why it is drooling out?
uh, bugs,
Patient is not able to swallow. See, all
swallow.
of us, without our knowledge, we keep on swallowing our saliva. So whenever there is a difficulty in swallowing, either it is a dysphagia or it is a facial muscle weakness which is not able to pull the saliva into the mouth and then swallowing, the patient will start drooling. Typically, you see patients drooling in a patient of a brainstem stroke, Parkinson's disease. So, drooling of saliva means there is a difficulty in swallowing saliva. That's what it means. So, in this patient, it is possible that stroke may be in the brainstem area because he may be having difficulty in swallowing. But even in carotid territory hemiplegia, the patient has difficulty in swallowing. So, it is possible that all it means is that there is a difficulty in swallowing. We do not know the territory as such. Okay, next.
So day three of illness, no improvement occurred and weakness remains the same as he was not able to hold glass or water or pen in his right hand, and he was requiring his son's help to get up from chair and to go to washroom as he was not able to move the right side of the body.
So his right hemiplegia on day 2 continued to remain stable on day 3, right?
Right, so
No improvement occurred, but more important is no deterioration, isn't it?
yes, sir.
So from the history, it looks that he has become stable. So over a period of 48 hours, the neurological deficit progressively worsened, and next 24 hours it remained stable, right? Then
So then day four of illness, in view of no improvement in the symptoms, his family took him to a local hospital in Alwar, where after examination he was referred to a higher center. Non-neurological imaging was done at that time. So on day five of illness, patient came to our hospital.
okay, so at the end of this story, patient has progressive right hemiparesis and stable for the next 2 days, and the localization most likely it could be carotid territory. That means the left cerebral infarction. No definite evidence of brainstem involvement as of now, but because of the difficulty in swallowing, there could be a brainstem involvement. We need to see. Okay, next.
So there was no history of head injury, no history of altered sensorium, no history of headache, vomiting, convulsion prior to onset of weakness. There was no history of fever, no bladder bowel involvement, no history of palpitation, chest pain, breathlessness, or any episode which recovered completely.
Why do you
Or
ask for
no,
the history of head injury?
yes, sir, I asked about the
No,
history of
what
head
is the
injury.
importance of asking for head injury? What has
So
head injury
maybe
to do with hemiparesis?
So if a patient, let's say, fall 1 or 2 months back and has developed a subdural hematoma, so he can present now with the chronic subdural hematoma
Yeah, very
and
correct.
present.
So subdural hematoma, so you need to ask for head injury. And altered sensorium, if you remember the last class when you said patient with an unconscious state, when does an altered sensorium occur in hemiplegia?
So when there is bilateral cerebral involvement, both cerebrum are involved,
Or,
and
or,
or there is any maybe any infarct in cerebellum that is compressing the brain stem.
no, 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 no. So last class, if you had attended, we said unilateral cerebral hemisphere lesion will not produce
Never.
unconsciousness
Yes.
because the seat of, where is the seat of consciousness?
So,
Brain stem, upper brain stem, reticular formation in midbrain and thalamus. So if there is a lesion in midbrain and thalamus, like brainstem infarction due to VBI, then the patient will have loss of consciousness. Or the patient has a hemiplegia on one side and the edema travels through the corpus callosum to the other side, the patient will gradually lapse into unconsciousness. Now, why did you ask for headache, vomiting, convulsions?
so headache, I asked to rule out subarachnoid hemorrhage and vomiting, conversion. These are all just to see whether patient has raised ICT features.
Okay, so the symptoms of headache, vomiting, convulsions tell us that it is more likely to be intracerebral bleed rather than an infarct. So one of the ways to differentiate an infarct from bleed clinically is history of headache, vomiting, convulsions. Okay, so they were not there. And why did you ask for fever?
So any case of meningitis or encephalitis?
Encephalitis, meningitis. Okay.
Yes.
Now, what are these of palpitation, chest pain, breathlessness? What does that mean?
So in a patient of atrial fibrillation, there are chances of embolism.
Very good. So whether the patient has a cardiogenic thromboembolism giving rise to the stroke, because the management is totally different if it is a cardiogenic thromboembolism, commonly due to atrial fibrillation, non-valvular atrial fibrillation. Good. So you have covered all the important causes for stroke in the history. Next.
So the past history, he is a known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus for 5 years, for which he was taking insulin and oral hypoglycemic agents. He is a known case of hypertension for 2 years, for which he was taking amlodipine.
But we are not sure how good is the control of BP and sugar, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the important investigation to know good control of diabetes?
HbA1c levels.
HbA1c. So when was it done last, according to the story?
So his wife said blood investigations. He underwent a routine investigation 2 years back.
2 years.
Only that.
After that, nothing has been done.
Nothing has been done.
Okay, usual story. Including educated, literate, and also remember doctors. There are many patients, doctors who come and say, "What happened? Illa sir, 1 varsha aitu, 1 saal ho gaya, I have not got it done." I am all right, including doctors. You can remember that. Okay, next.
So, personal history is a vegetarian by diet, non-smoker and non-alcoholic.
When do you call a person alcoholic? Because I see this very commonly used word, alcoholic. Suppose he takes a drink once in a week, or many army personnel or many people may have one peg every alternate day. Would you call them alcoholic? Taking alcohol, no. Is it alcoholic, or is there any criteria to say a person is alcoholic?
So there is a criteria. If there is intake of more than 35 grams of alcohol in a week, so that comes under alcoholism. Otherwise, no.
Okay, because people use the word very loosely, alcoholic, in writing the case sheet, and nowadays we copy that at the time of discharge and write there in the type it and say not alcoholic. They get very offended. So please be very careful when you use the words. Because somebody has given me the definition of alcoholic, more than 14 units a week, or features of dependence. Dependence, of course, there is no question at all. And so another person has said 80 grams per week for 10 years. But how do you convert this into beer and whiskey? That is important. Okay, as somebody be calculating that, go to the
right,
next
100 ml. Yes, 100 ml of beer. Yes, sir. 100 ml of beer. So 100 ml of beer contains 10 grams, then 30 ml of whiskey is equals to 10 grams, 45 ml of country liquor is equals to 10 grams. So that's how we calculate.
Okay, so please use the word properly. Don't use the word alcoholic.
The Sambi, he's a 54-year-old male, known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, hypertension, non-smoker, non-alcoholic, admitted with complaint of sudden onset right-sided weakness, which was progressive in nature, associated with slurring of speech and deviation of angle of mouth to left side, with no history of trauma, headache, fever, seizures, no loss of consciousness, and no such episode in past. So, on the basis of the history, my diagnosis is it is a right-sided hemiplegia with UMN type of facial nerve palsy, left side with dysarthria, can be likely due to pseudobulbar palsy, and the probabilityology could be ischemic infarct or a hypertensive bleed.
Whenever you make a probable diagnosis, please mention the territory also. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Ischemic
Okay, sir.
infarct, which territory? Bleed,
Okay, sir.
where is it likely? How do you distinguish between ischemic infarct and a intracerebral hemorrhage clinically?
So ischemic infarct, it will take time to progress. But in the case of bleed, it will be some sudden onset. Patient will have the features of raised ICT. While in case of infarct, patient will be conscious and the symptoms will progress over the time.
In both conditions, symptoms will progress over the time. And if the patient has a brainstem infarct, he will be unconscious from the word go. It doesn't help. What are the features which help, clinical features which help to distinguish infarct from bleed?
So features of raised ICT.
Pardon?
Headache or any
okay, as you
seizure
said in the
episode.
history, people who have headache, vomiting, convulsions, more likely to have a bleed rather than an infarct because the blood is a irritating substance to the neurons, and so it is likely to cause seizures rather than an infarct. Right? Headache, vomiting, convulsions. One. Other features are past history of TIA or past history of stroke. It is extremely rare for a person to have second intracranial bleed, intracerebral bleed, but a patient can have 2-3 recurrent strokes or TIA. So TIA and this stroke is more likely to be infarct. Patient who have hypertension uncontrolled, more likely to be a hemorrhage. No hypertension, unlikely to be a hemorrhage. So the distinguishing features are number 1, TIA, number 2, presence of hypertension or not, and number 3 is headache, vomiting, convulsions, and there is a rapid deterioration in case of intracerebral hemorrhage. In ischemic infarct, if the patient is improving, you understand, day 1 he deteriorated to day 2, by the time he comes to you on day 5 he is better. Now that can't happen in bleed. He is improving in his motor power and speech. So these are the clinical differentiating features between an infarct and hematoma. Okay. So you should always write which territory infarct and where location. What are the locations of hypertensive bleed?
So usually it occurs in basal ganglia. Putamen is the most common site.
Yes.
So putamen is the most common site.
Putamen. Somebody please mute. Putamen.
You give them and you make them.
Hello. Can you please mute your speakers? Okay, tell me.
So most common basal ganglia. Putamen is the most common site.
Right. Basal ganglia in the supratentorial compartment, thalamus and basal ganglia. In infratentorial compartment, infratentorial, pons and cerebellum. So these are the areas of hypertensive bleed. In the supratentorial, thalamus, basal ganglia, sometimes what is called as a lobar hemorrhage, and in infratentorial pons and cerebellum. Why you should know that these are the locations of hypertensive bleed is that if you find a bleed anywhere apart from these locations, you should not say that, okay, this is hypertensive bleed, even though the patient may be hypertensive. You should look for other causes of intracerebral bleed than merely saying it is hypertension. You understand? The reason why you should know the common sites of hypertensive bleed is that bleed is present in any other site than these. You should look for an underlying cause like arteriovenous malformation, aneurysms, venous thrombosis, or a systemic bleeding disorder. So that's why it's important to know it is not just a intracerebral bleed and patient is hypertensive. So it is hypertensive bleed. Okay, next.
So, general physical examination. So, patient was conscious and cooperative, average build. The patient was lying on bed with flexed adducted and semi-pronated right upper limb and extended adducted and plantar flexed right lower limb. Pulse rate was 90, BP was 166 by 90 mm of Hg, respiratory rate was 14 per minute. There was no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, pedal edema, or lymphadenopathy.
Now, wait. The blood pressure 166 by 90. Is it hypertension or you call it as normal?
I will call it as normal.
Okay, now oftentimes there is a reactive hypertension after a stroke. The patient never had history of hypertension, but probably because he never went to a doctor, let's say. And you found that the patient has 180 by 110 blood pressure at admission with a hemiplegia. So how do you distinguish whether it is a reactive hypertension or whether it is a established hypertension also having a stroke? Anybody? See what happens in a ischemic infarct. The infarcted tissue loses the automatic adjustment of the blood pressure.
Yes,
So the nature wants more blood to go into the ischemic area by increasing the blood pressure because the autonomous features of cerebrum is lost. So it is called as a reactive hypertension. Now, how do you distinguish? Yes, somebody has said yes. Sudhir has replied correctly. Look for telltale evidence of hypertension in the past. How do you look for it? ECG shows left ventricular hypertrophy or ischemic changes, or the patient has fundal examination shows hypertensive retinopathy, as somebody has said, galaxy, correct. So look for evidence of hypertension in other organs, in the eye and in the heart. If they are all normal, it does not exclude that he had hypertension earlier, but at least you are not sure whether it is a reactive hypertension or not. You wait for the BP to come down on day 3 or day 4 without antihypertensive drugs. The patient maintains normal blood pressure. Then we know retrospectively it is a reactive hypertension. Okay, next.
So, now CNS examination. First, higher mental functions. Patient was conscious, cooperative. Orientation could not be assessed. Memory seems to be intact. Speech comprehension, vocal was intact. Writing was intact. Word output, repetition, naming incomprehensible. Intelligence cannot be assessed.
Writing, was able to write with the right hand or left hand?
So with left hand.
Yeah, it's
He was
very
able to
important to realize that patients with the right hemiplegia can write with the left hand for the first time in their life. The spelling will be normal, though it may not be, handwriting may not be good, but the ability to write and ability to talk is the communication outside. Ability to understand written, ability to understand spoken is the sensory speech. So here all 4 have been examined except for dysarthria. Other things are intact. That means there is no involvement of language area. That is the language area, Broca's and Wernicke's. That area is not involved. So it gives you a clear picture of localization. Patient has a right hemiplegia, but the language is intact. That means there is no lesion in that language area. You understand? So the lesion may be anywhere else, but not in the language area. But suppose the language area is affected, we can precisely localize the lesion into the language area in the left parieto-temporal region. Okay, next.
So now cranial nerve examination. So facial nerve examination, wrinkling of forehead was present, able to close eyes tightly, no flattening of nasolabial fold on right side, deviation of angle of mouth to left side on showing the teeth, and on the examination of hypoglossal nerve, there was no motor weakness. So rest all cranial nerve examination of other nerves were within normal limits.
So you think it is a UMN or LMN facial?
So it is a UMN because forehead, upper face is not involved. There
Why?
was normal wrinkling.
Why it is not?
So because he was able to close the eyes tightly.
No.
If it was a,
why is it the upper part of the face is not involved in UMN?
so because upper part of the face is supplied by both the sides. So if there is weakness of one side, so other fibers from the other side will compensate.
So the upper part of the face, that means the frontalis muscle, is supplied by both the hemispheres. Understand?
Right.
Hello?
Yeah, yes, sir.
So because the frontalis is supplied by both the hemispheres, that is why one hemisphere is non-functioning, does not cause paralysis of the frontalis. The lower part of the face is supplied by one side only. So there is a mild weakness in UMN as compared to severe weakness in LMN. Okay, right.
So now motor system examination.
Now, one second. You said that tongue movements are normal.
Yes, sir.
Then why has he got dysarthria?
So I asked him to move the tongue upward, downward, laterally. He was able to perform all those tasks.
See, what you have to do is in the dysarthria, is it a lingual dysarthria? That means that those words for which we use the tongue, for example, tongue, ta, ta, ta. So whereas the facial is pa, pa, ba, ba, ma, only the lips are required. Ta, ta, dha, dha, na. That requires movement of the tongue. So you should ask him to speak the words which requires tongue involvement. Though physically examination may show normal tongue movements, the finer aspects of the tongue movement are affected, causing dysarthria. Or you think that only the lip involvement like papa, baba, ma, only that is affected, then we know that it is the facial muscles which is causing the dysarthria. So you have to localize dysarthria to facial muscles or a tongue muscles, because you have to answer the tongue is normal. So does it mean the patient's problem of dysarthria is facial? Very unlikely. The facial muscles must say, unless it is a lower motor neuron, usually upper motor neuron doesn't cause dysarthria due to facial weakness, because the facial weakness is quite minimal. So you should specifically ask for tongue phonation, like I said, ta, ta, da, da, na. Okay, next.
So now motor system examination, nutrition was normal. Tone on the right side of the upper limb was raised. Same in the lower limb on the right side was raised. Power in the upper limb was 3/5, and in the lower limb it was 2/5. On the left side, examination was normal.
Okay.
Coordination, no, yes, sir.
So clinically, we thought he has right hemiparesis, and you have confirmed that he has right hemiparesis. Clinical also, we thought he has a UMN right side facial. You have confirmed it is right side facial. So you see now, 80% of your diagnosis is already done from the history. The physical examination, what we call as a focused neurological examination, is just trying to confirm that it is a right hemiparesis. What we are interested is whether the patient has a brainstem involvement or a carotid territory involvement. So on examination, you should look for left side weakness also. Suppose the patient has a left-sided cerebellar ataxia, or the patient has left side weakness also, then we know that bilateral weakness, which is not available from the history, from the examination. Otherwise, In the examination, what we do in day-to-day practice is, he has got right hemiparesis, patient has told, I have got right side weakness. History-wise, we said in medical term, he has right hemiparesis. So what are you examining? Looking for brainstem localization. Look carefully for diplopia, look for left-sided weakness, left-sided cerebellar problem to localize it further to brainstem. Okay, next.
So coordination was normal, can't be assessed on the right side.
Right.
No involuntary movement seen.
Okay.
Sensory examination was within normal limits. Reflexes, superficial plantar was extensor on the right side. Left was normal. Deep tendon reflexes were brisk on the right side and were normal on the left side. So spine was normal. There was no signs of meningeal irritation and other systems were within normal limit.
Wait. Why did you say spine? Why are you looking for spine? What is your localization? Is it intracerebral or a cervical cord?
No, it's cerebral, intracerebral.
Why did you say cerebral? Why can't it be cervical cord hemiplegia?
So if it is high cervical region, so
High cervical can produce hemiplegia.
Yeah, along with lower cranial nerve involvements, it should be present.
Cervical cord doesn't cause lower cranial nerve. You are talking about craniovertebral anomaly. What is the most important symptom in this patient which localizes to the brain? History-wise,
facial muscle
dysarthria. Dysarthria. How can a patient with cervical cord lesion have dysarthria? You understand? Plus, somebody as Sudhir has mentioned facial palsy, correct? So facial palsy on examination and history-wise localizes to intracranial, because sometimes in the clinical practice, patient will come only for right upper limb, right lower limb weakness. You are not sure whether it is a cervical cord or an MR scan. MR brain. So you should carefully look for evidence of intracranial involvement: headache, vomiting, seizures, dysarthria, facial involvement. See that all this will tell you that we are dealing with intracranial. So you don't do an MR cervical spine in this patient. Okay, so it is not relevant for you to say spine is normal. You can say, okay, signs of meningeal irritation are not there. Okay, next.
So my diagnosis is neurodeficit. It is UMN type of hemiplegia on right side of the body. UMN type of facial nerve palsy of lower part of face with dysarthria. Anatomical localization, it is left-sided corticospinal tract involvement, left-sided supranuclear facial nerve palsy, can be pseudobulbar palsy. Pathological diagnosis, either it can be ischemic stroke, most likely left MCA infarct, or it can be a hemorrhagic bleed. Etiology, it can be because of long-standing uncontrolled diabetes mellitus and hypertension.
Okay, good. But just now I asked you how to distinguish an ischemic infarct from an intracranial, intracerebral bleed.
Yes, sir.
So we told you the difference: headache, vomiting, convulsions, bleed,
yes,
and then the rapid deterioration, bleed, existing hypertension, bleed, past history of TIA, or the present deficit is improving by the time the patient comes. It is in favor of a infarct. So now looking into that story, which one do you think is the first? Ischemia or hemorrhage?
Ischemia.
Ischemia where left MCA, correct. So you should say infarct, which territory? Left middle cerebral artery. Why do you say most likely? If it is an ischemic infarct, it is a MCA infarct, not in the posterior or in the anterior cerebral artery. And it is not involving, you rightly said it is a corticospinal tract, it is not the cortex involvement. Suppose the MCA infarct has involved the cortex of the language area, you would have found the patient has language dysfunction. Okay. Now, yes, can this be a lacunar infarct?
So, in lacunar infarct, we can see dense hemiplegia.
Pardon?
Sir, in lacunar infarct, we can see dense hemiplegia, but their facial nerve weakness should not be there in
So
lacunar
it can
infarct.
be there. Lacunar infarct is a sudden, full-fledged stroke. There is no deterioration because it is a small area, deep vessels infarct. So if somebody has an abrupt onset of hemiplegia, fully conscious alert, then it can be a lacunar infarct. But here the patient has gradually worsened, dysarthria, then hemiparesis. So it is not a lacunar infarct. Okay, now with this diagnosis, what is the investigation of choice for anatomical localization? You have localized it to the left cerebral hemisphere. So what is the investigation of choice?
I will go for CT scan.
You will go for CT scan because if the patient can afford, definitely MRI scan. If the patient cannot afford, CT scan is enough because you want to know, because he is beyond the window period. So you want to know whether you should give antiplatelets or not. So a CT is more than enough. In my practice, where patient cannot afford MR scan, when he comes to me like this on day 5, all I want to know is whether there was a bleed. So a plain CT is done, not even contrast. If plain CT is normal, that means by default it is an infarct, then I can put him on antiplatelet drug. But if it is a patient can afford, we do an MR brain because we get much more information, not going to be practically useful to the patient, but we know whether he had some more infarcts here and there, some lacunar infarcts, how much more the brain is affected. So you're right, CT is more than sufficient, that to a plain CT. Okay, next.
So now there are
So you did a,
other blood investigations.
yeah,
Yes, sir. So these are the blood investigations
so
which
they're all
we
normal.
have performed. Yes, sir.
What
So
was the
he has
admission blood sugar?
so admission blood sugar was 254.
Okay, because
Yes,
remember,
sir.
patient can come with an acute right hemiplegia due to hypoglycemia, and you do a GRBS, you find it is 70 or 80, give glucose, the patient dramatically improves. Not in this patient, because in this patient there is a progressive decline. Those who come with an acute onset, you should do a GRBS and give IV glucose. Okay, let's go to the specific investigation.
Yes, sir.
MR brain.
Yes, sir. So that was the CT scan of the patient.
Acha, good.
Yes, sir.
So what does it show?
So it showed a bleed with
Here.
few lacunar infarcts.
Where is the bleed?
So by the location, it is most likely in basal ganglia, maybe involving the putamen.
So the patient has left basal ganglia bleeding. That's how you should read. The patient has a left basal ganglia bleed. So you see that clinically we thought is more in favor of a infarct, but then the radiological examination shows it is a bleed. So if the patient is already on aspirin, we stop that. Otherwise, we don't start aspirin in this patient, aspirin or clobrazam. Okay, now that bleed is there. What about carotid Doppler?
So because patient now will not go for carotid Doppler because this is a case of bleed. We go for carotid Doppler when we suspect when patient presents with ischemic stroke.
Very good. But I keep seeing in practice, in spite of intracerebral bleed, they do carotid Doppler. There's absolutely no need to do carotid Doppler. Carotid Doppler is done only for intervention in future to prevent another stroke. So unless it's a ischemic infarct, to prevent another stroke, we do a carotid Doppler, and if it is more than 70% stenosis in the appropriate carotid artery, the intervention, either stenting or endarterectomy, should be done preferably within 3 to 4 weeks after the stroke. Okay, so this patient doesn't require carotid Doppler. Even if carotid Doppler shows 80% stenosis, we don't have to do anything. How will you manage this patient?
So here the patient, as the CT showed, there was no midline shift and the patient is not deteriorating. So here we will manage him symptomatically.
Right. Symptomatically, what you will do?
So I will, we will not start antiplatelet. So we will give him statin and we will control the blood sugar.
So you control the blood pressure, most important. You control the blood pressure and other parameters, sodium, glucose and all that.
Yes.
When will you do surgery?
So if the patient symptomatically, if he will worsen, patient will become unconscious, if brain edema will increase or this bleed will increase to an extent that there will be a significant shift. So then only we will
Suppose
operate.
this patient says, can I go home, doctor?
No.
Will you send him home?
No.
Why?
Sir, I want to observe the patient.
Let me put the question other way around. When do you think the bleed will continue to increase, causing more and more neurological deficit and altered sensorium? Within 24 hours to 48 hours. The bleed does not go on expanding over a period of several days unless the bleed is due to arteriovenous malformation, aneurysm like that. The intracerebral bleed usually does not expand beyond 24 hours. Usually does not expand beyond 24 hours. So this patient, very, very unlikely that the bleed will increase and he will become altered sensorium and we try to do a decompressive surgery. So if the person says, I can't afford to stay in hospital, I want to go back to village, I will allow him to go back, control his blood pressure with his local doctor and physiotherapy. You understand?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
So there is no chance of him undergoing any surgery. In fact, even a large hematoma, when the patient, as somebody, Kaushik has said, when there is a drop in the level of sensorium, a patient who was fully conscious in the morning with a dense hemiplegia, by evening he has become drowsy. You find the scan shows a midline shift. You tell the relatives, patient's life can be saved by surgery, but hemiplegia will not improve. It's very important. We are saving the patient life because midline shift, compression of the upper brainstem, coma and death. So that part we would like to do surgery. Whether it is an infarct or whether it is a bleed, the surgery in stroke is done not for improving the hemiplegia, but only to save the life. This is very, very important because after surgery, the relatives will say, what doctor, who has spent so much money, is still densely hemiplegic. You understand? So this should be very clearly mentioned. The surgery in stroke is to save the life. Okay. Any other questions you people have? Okay. No. Okay. So with this, I have already told you difference between ischemic and hemorrhagic. If it is ischemic stroke, we know that aspirin, clopidogrel, and statin for 3 months, followed by only aspirin for 150. Let me just go. So this is a very important message which all of you should give to your patients. Brain attack needs to be popularized like heart attack. Time is brain, face, arm, speech. Immediately rush to the nearest hospital which has a stroke facility.